Hello, welcome back to my channel. So this is the second part of the series of UiPath Document Understanding Solution Architecture. And in the first one, we looked at the overall architecture of the solution, how it should be. So in this one, we will look at how we can achieve this using the UiPath Document Understanding Framework. So basically, we are not going to cover everything about the framework in this video, but we will see what are the different execution methods we have in the framework, like the attended and unattended. And then we'll look at the major difference between those two. And finally, we will look at how we can quickly set up a new document understanding framework to quickly run for invoices or receipts. So that's the framework is already built to handle invoices and receipts. So with quick steps, we can easily get it up and running. So we'll see how we can do that. So in the framework, this is how it looks like. So over here, you can see two different options. One is for unattended, the other one is for attended. If you look at the flow, by high level, you can see that it's almost the same. The structure looks very much the same, but there is a small difference. So when it comes to unattended, it is designed to run without any intervention. The only place where we can involve is for the validation. So for that, it will use the action center. So the validation will happen for classification. It will also happen for document data extraction. And all these things will go into Action Center as a task, and you can verify it from there. So this is the activity. We'll get into this stuff later. But when it comes to attended, it is slightly different. So one more thing. So for unattended, you can see it is using the queue as the source to process the documents. But there is also an extra option. You can also pass in the file as an argument and set this to false. So this refers to the structure that we spoke about in the first part, where a human can involve and process only this document processing flow. So it is designed to do that. And when it comes to attended, it is slightly different. You can see if in attended mode, you also need to find a way to pass the file path. So that will happen through a simple select document window. So through that, you can pass in the file, and then the validation and classification, sorry, the classification and data extraction validation will happen through the validation station. This it is the it will use the present classification station, and it will use the present data validation station. So it's the attended version of the action center task. So that's the major difference that you see. And even in this, you can see the two input arguments, same as in the unattended. So this way, when you publish this process into Orchestrator, you can either use that job running screen, or you can connect this with any other application like UiPath apps to pass in the file path and process it. So this is the major difference in these two, but the overall architecture looks exactly the same. And as I mentioned before, the framework is originally designed to process invoices and receipts. So with that, we can quickly set it up and make it work for the either of these two document types. But if you want to add any other extra document type, you need to configure it. But that's a topic for another video. So for this one, we'll just see how we can easily configure this and what are the steps required to do a quick setup and get it up and running. So the major changes or the major things that you need to look at is not in the workflow, it's actually in the config file. So you can find the config file under the data folder. Give me a second to open this. So in the config file, we have a lot of settings here. So you get a lot of settings in the setting sheet under constants, assets, invoice processing, and receipts. So in this video, we will not look at all of these things. We'll only look at the things needed to get it up and running real quick for invoices. And it applies for receipts as well. So in the setting sheet, these highlighted uh, options are the things that you need to look at. So if we quickly go through the folders or the configurations, the first one is to show or to have a folder where all the validated items that gets downloaded. So all the documents that go into Action Center, when it is resumed, it downloads to a temporary folder. So that's this one. And this is where you're going to store all the exported data, as in Excel files, once the validation is done. So you can keep it as the default paths or you can change it to any other location. And if you're using training to retrain your models, this is where you're going to store the training data that you need to pass to the action center. So this applies for receipts and this applies for invoices. And this is where you are going to have your uh, intelligent keyword classifier or the keyword classifier JSON file. And these are your endpoints. So as of now, I'm not going to do any changes here. I'll be using these endpoints as it is. But let's assume in your process, you have a invoice model that you have trained in your AI center and you have it as a public scale. So those things, you can change this endpoint and easily connect it. So that's all you need to do here. In your assets sheet, you have a set of assets. So basically you have 12 assets that you need to configure. And first one is for the API key, and this is to see or set whether you want to always run the validation, uh, manual validation. You can also read through the thing. And this is to mention whether you want to always do the manual data extraction verification, whether you want to skip classifier and extractor training. So all these are like Boolean values. And then you have the action catalog that you need to create in Action Center. And its folder path, storage bucket, folder path, the name and the folder path, and where you have the document understanding queue to get the documents from, and the classification threshold. And then you just need to mention the orchestrator folder path where all your assets are going to get created. So let's get to the orchestrator. So in my orchestrator, I have created all these assets in this folder, the demo slash document understanding. So if you go here, all these are my assets. So as of now, this is my configuration. So I'm saying I don't want to do the classification all the time. I need to validate and only do it when needed. Same for validation. the data extraction part. And this is my catalog name. I'll also show you how to create the catalog. Action folder path, where the catalog is. This is classification threshold, queue name, where the queue is, and storage bucket path and storage bucket name. So if I go to storage buckets under this folder, you can see my storage bucket. This is the Orchestrator provided one. So how to create the action catalog? For that, you need to go into actions. So in actions, you need to go to the admin view from this admin settings, and you can see the same folder structure as you see in your Orchestrator. Go into the folder that you need to create the action catalog, and you can create it from here. Just give a name and just click on create. I already have mine created. So that's the name that you see in my queues. The assets. Here you go. So once you have done that configuration and once you have created these assets, in your config file, just update where all these are located in your folder structure in Orchestrator. And that's it. So once you have done this configuration, your solution is ready to run. So if you go to our workflow over here, whether it's attended or whether it's unattended, we need to find a source to run the document. So as I mentioned to you the other day in our structure, um, if we are going with unattended, we need to have a source solution that focus on your data source and collects the documents and put it into a queue. And then the document understanding flow will run as one job per document and it will process those. So for attended, you can give the folder path. For unattended, you need to have a solution. So it will quickly run the attended version. So I can show you how it works. So I have configured everything now. I'll close my config file and then I'll run. So while this thing runs, in our upcoming videos, we'll also look into each and every workflow that's available here. This is just the starting point. So it should give me a pop-up window, yes, to select the files. So let me go to my folder structure. I have few invoices here. Let's try running with this. So you can see it's the initialization started. It will take few seconds. So digitization started. And here we have the classification session. So you can see it already identified it as an invoice. And now the data extraction will take place. And I should see the validation station shortly. And here we have it. So it's using the public endpoint of the invoices. I don't have an invoice model created right now, but if you have it, you can update your config file with that endpoint. So you can see it was already able to extract information. So I'll just click on continue and submit. And the files get saved by default in this exports folder because I did not change the file path. And here you can see this is the new file. If we open the file, we can see all the extracted information. And this is the formatter sheet with the formatting. And here you have the line items. So that's how it works. So you basically saw the attended version of the process. So what if we want to run this as unattended? So I'll show this in the orchestrator itself so that I can show you the two different variations. So all you need to do is just publish this into your orchestrator, and once you have it, so I have already done it for my scenario over here. So once you have it in your orchestrator, just go to jobs and start. So this is how you usually run the unattended one. If it is scheduled, it will create a job. So just select the process, and in this argument section, you can see the two input arguments that we have in our workflow over here. These are the two input arguments. But for us to run this, we need to have items in the queue. But for this one, we don't need, because this is bypassing the queue and it will just take the value from here. So let me confirm. So if you go into the queues, I already have a queue over here and I don't see any transactions inside. So for us to run this, let me go to jobs. I'll start a new job, and under these two options, we'll give a folder name so that we can try it. I'll copy the path from here. I'll update this value. We don't need double quotes. Save it. Change this to false because we are not going to use the queue. So what happens here is we are changing these two only for this job. The change we do here does not affect your process, the default settings. So this will only happen for the job, and just click on start. And now you can see the process is running. Let me refresh. Here you can see the process running. Let's give it a few seconds. So you can see it is creating the validation action now, and it went into suspended mode. So let's get to the validation station. We have one unassigned activity. This is created just few seconds ago. Let me assign to myself. And this is our invoice. So it was able to identify, but I mentioned the threshold as 70% in the asset, and that's why we are getting this. So let's finish the action, and this should start. So you get the idea now. So through that through that arguments option we see in the jobs, you can run any process at any given time from uh, from the user end. On the other side, if you want to run this in a queue as the usual unattended fashion, so I will not do the verification for the validation because it's the usual procedure. So if you want to run this in a queue, you need to have a different solution that updates the queue. So for that, I have a separate studio solution you can see here that monitors my invoices folder, and all it does is it updates the items into a queue. So let's run this and let's quickly update the queue. So you can see on your left side output funnel, it's updating the items to the queue. So we have like 10 documents. And if we go to our queue now we should see 10 new items. Earlier we had only one successful one that was processed like yesterday. So now for this queue, if we run our process over here, it will only process one item. So let's start. So this time I'm not going to change anything over here. It's the default setting. And for this one, we'll do the full uh, full cycle so that we can see how it works. So we have the action suspended. We'll quickly go here and we'll take the latest one. So that was the validation action that you saw earlier that we created. So I'll finish this, and here's the logs. And it's creating the validation action now. So if we come here, this is the latest validation action. Oh, sorry. Yes, this is the old one that we processed manually. This is our latest one. And I'll not go through the full validation. So let's just submit. All I wanted to show here is how this flow works and what happens when one iteration ends. So the data export is happening and the process ended. The reason is it processed only one document in a job. So how are you going to configure that so that it takes all the items in a queue without us triggering the job? That is happening actually through a trigger. So if you go to automations under triggers, you can actually create a queue trigger to look at that queue. So this is a time-based one. If you go to queue triggers, you can say, I want to run this process and I want to monitor this queue. And every time there are new items, I want to trigger this process. So once you have done that, every time the queue gets updated, it will automatically trigger the job for each item. So that's how your DU process is going to get executed. So that way, if you get 10 items into the queue, you will have 10 jobs taking care of each item. Same happens for any number of documents you add to the queue. So this is the high level, easy setup in the document understanding template. And that's with those easy steps, you can just quickly configure your process, run it for invoices or receipts. And in the following videos, we'll see, we'll go into each and every workflow here and see how we can configure those in a step-by-step way. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope this is helpful for you to understand how the document understanding framework works and how you can easily set it up in and do the configurations in the config sheet and action catalogs. And that's it. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next part of the series. Thank you so much and have a good day.